Okay.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good, good, good. Looking forward to our phone call. Oh, our phone call, our call today.
It's so weird that we do this now just via a Zoom call, and now it's basically just phone calls all the way.
Yeah, yeah. Life has changed. I mean, I think we were talking last time. What would it be like if this had happened 20 years ago? These
Oh,
calls just would not have been possible.
no.
So, just delighted again, my dear, to be talking to you.
Thank you. I love them. I really do. I'm glad that we do have weekly calls. And I was just like, let's record one. And you're like, yeah. And I was like, oh, she said yes. Weekly call.
I said yes. The man from Del Monte. She said yes.
Well, something I always loved about our relationship and something that I admired about you particularly was you were well into IT at a very, very young age. You knew exactly what you wanted to do. Do you want to tell us a bit
Oh yes.
about that story?
Um, yeah, I I suddenly got the IT bug. I was 9. What it was is I was living in Wales, and it was the 5th anniversary of the Aberfan disaster, which was that awful situation in Wales where the Nutty Slack collapsed onto a school, and it killed many, many people, many children. And I remember seeing that on the television, but at the same time, now it might have been different times, but I associate it with the same time. I remember seeing the news, BBC News on Wales, talking about the largest data centre in Europe being opened in Wales, and it's what we now know as the DVLA. And they said about computers. And this was like I'm giving my age away now, 1969. And they said, and I said to my father, "What's a computer?" And he just shrugged his shoulders, said, "I don't know." Adding machine of some sort, I think. And he came back a few days later, and I've still got the images of this book in my head, of the Ladybird Book of Computers. And
Ladybird.
Ladybird, yeah. So I had the Ladybird Book of Birds, the Ladybird Book of this, the Ladybird Book of that, but I had computers, the Ladybird Book of Computers, and I remember reading it from cover to cover. And the last, because if you remember, you used to have some work writing on one side and pictures on the other. And the picture on one side was of this big, huge open warehouse type space with these seeming cupboards around the outside, one desk in the middle with a terminal on it, and the one person sitting at that terminal. And they had a list of jobs of all the things that you could do, being working in computers. And one of the jobs was a systems analyst. And I went, that's what I want to do, systems analyst. So nobody at that point in time really understood what a systems analyst did, but I was trying, we didn't have, the Wikipedia, we didn't have Google and everything else, but I understood it was about learning how systems work and doing something with them, and it just captured my soul, and that's what I wanted to do. So I ended up in a comprehensive school at 15, when they were talking about what do you want to do for a job. So mum goes along to the careers evening, and it said comprehensive school, and we weren't expected to do very well. So careers evening, and it's come work for Sainsbury's, be a shop filler, that sort of thing.
Great.
And yeah, exactly. Talk about aspirational. Yeah. And my mum went over to the careers, and she said, that's what she wants to work with computers. She wants to be a systems analyst. And the woman just looked at her very, very blankly and said, she's got to get her maths for that. And mum said, I don't think there's any problems with that, because that was my favourite subject. So all the woman did was just shove some leaflets into my mum's hand, and my mum came home with some leaflets, but none the wiser. And I tried to get into college doing computer studies, and the course, which was a full-time course, was reduced to a part-time course. And then unfortunately my father said that I couldn't do a part-time course, so I had to go out and get some work, and I started working for a computer company at 16. And this particular computer company was doing some amazing stuff with equipment. The first 300 megabyte hard disk. 300 megabyte is nothing now, but this thing was about 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot, meter and a half by meter and a half by meter and a half for 300 megabytes. And you can get more than that now. You can do a couple of gigs on a tiny little thumb drive. And we were the first company in the world to put 1 meg into core. So that, for anybody that understands that, that's fine. But for people that don't,
like
we load up our computers now, we have a load of memory that everything goes into the memory as we're working, and we have some 64 times the amount of processing, 64,000 times the amount of processing on our iPhones or whatever than we had at that point. But we were groundbreakers, this company I worked for. So that's how I got started. That's a long story around it. And it had just been from age 9, that's all I ever wanted to do. Just wanted to work with computers. Maybe it was I was trying to avoid people, who knows? But and at least
hands up introverts.
exactly. At least if it goes wrong, there's some logic to it going wrong. If people go wrong, you don't really know.
Can't control or delete, can you?
No, not easily. Not easily.
So did that company then put you into the Agile systems? Like what got you into this whole Agile thingamabob?
Right. So the company that I worked for, this is many years before Agile became, a thought. And before that, there was a thing called RAD, which was rapid architectural development, which was a way of looking at things so that you could get things done relatively speedily without being able to understand the whole of what it was that you were trying to achieve.
That's mind-blowing.
And Agile came, I think, slightly after that. It was Sutherland who developed Agile, and his backstory is amazing because he was an ex-RAF guy, ex-American Forces guy that came out working for a computer company next to a company that was making robots, and these robots were making decisions based on previous experience, and he suddenly realized that he could merge the two together. So that's where Agile came from, brain the size of the planet. And I was there quite early. I actually had my Agile training with Mr. Sutherland, which was fantastic. Exactly, name drop. And I think where that benefited me is that it gave me the understanding of not just what one has to do, but how one thinks about doing it, which is different, because you're not just going through, if I do X, Y, and Z, then I get the result. It's why am I doing X, Y, and Z, which means that it means that you can review what you're doing, you can learn from it, and you go back to sort of the core principles. And Agile's not that magic bullet for any company, and it predominantly it's being used in software development, but it can be used pretty much in any environment. But I say it's not a magic bullet because you can't just introduce Agile and everything goes smoothly. Far from it. They say when you bring a team up, it's forming, storming, norming, and then performing. So the idea, when you bring a group of people together, you will have tension. And if you're not having tension in that type of environment, it's probably because everybody's still too polite. And Agile is about is about some honesty with people. That you bring a group of people together and you put them and you enable them to sit and interact together. And if I'm really good and I've got a strong personality and I'm working with somebody else that is also really good and has a strong personality, the potentials are that we are going to clash. But the acceptance is that that's okay, because ultimately we'll understand each other, and ultimately we'll be able to interweave that knowledge and that strength for the better of the group. So the use of Agile is, a pretty interesting concept. And I see that now it's been the thought processes, even if we don't call it Agile, the thought processes are being used in many different companies in many different ways.
And so in terms of you being able to continue in computers, did you get that fulfilled through following the Agile? Because I believe you became a Scrum Master. Is that the word? So you then...
Yeah. Oh, you are good.
Look at my memory, right?
Yeah.
So does that then mean you went from computers to then having to manage people?
I think I was already on that journey.
Okay. And how did that feel to your 9-year-old self?
My 9-year-old self had already grown, I think. I think what had happened is I'd gone in as the techie. I became network manager for Compaq UK, which then became part of HP. I was heading up a network management group across the whole of Europe for Compaq. So I'd done all the techie stuff. But what started to happen was that I started to realize that the techie stuff in itself didn't make the business work. It was the relationships and the individuals that made basically businesses work. In that, if you have two people of exactly the same qualifications and one has a positive mindset and one has a negative mindset, then the one with a negative mindset will tend to infect the mentality of those around and bring that group of people, bring it down to his level. If you have somebody with a positive effect, then they bring people up. And just throwing in an aside, if you put a woman in a group, she upgrades the IQ of the whole group. If it's all men, stick a woman in the group, and they're all uplifted.
The men will become intelligent.
Yes, really. And it's not because women are more intelligent, but it's the way that we can. I think it's the way that we can foster that group rather than the interactions, which might be a little bit more combative. Or adversarial. We enable that group to work together. It probably is the same if you stick a man in a woman's group, but it's because I'm a woman, I'm going to say that one. But
yeah, we're allowed. There's 2 women here.
We're allowed. But it became very obvious to me that teams that were working well together, teams that had an honesty about them, teams that were able to deal with conflict, deal with awkward situations by being able to say, this is happening, this is how I feel, this is the result of it. Being able to have those uplifted conversations, that emotional side of it, the EQ rather than the IQ, those teams were doing better. And working within those teams, and I say within rather than as a manager of those teams, working within those teams was much more joyous because you knew that people weren't going to, the backstabbing that might have been there wasn't there, that they were more cooperative, things got done. It might be my job role, but I don't actually have that skill, but I know that somebody else is going to come and sit with me and upskill me or help me to do it without any judgment. And that role that I adopted as a Scrum Master was to enable that type of interaction to happen, because the role of a Scrum Master is, there's a term, servant leader. And what it is that although you might be leading someone, you are a servant to their needs. So if people have problems around, you're doing your best to resolve all of those problems, because the whole group can move forward as a result of that problem resolution. And that side of it was what made me feel good about going into work. It wasn't, oh my goodness, there's another problem. It's, oh my goodness, there's another problem. How can we solve that?
So really, like, you were very happy to change your original dream as the journey happened. You were happy for that, because something that you probably noticed from me is I'm really not that great at making goals or dreams and stuff, because things change. And I think a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves to say, well, when I was blah years old, I was told I had to learn to be blah, blah. And it's wonderful to hear that you allowed yourself to move into a new progression and embraced how you felt about certain areas. Are there any tips for allowing yourself to follow a different journey than perhaps you may have thought you wanted even a few years ago, let alone?
Well, I think what you've just said there actually sums it up. It's the conversation somebody else had told you to do X, Y, and Z. Well, that isn't you. You've said about allowing yourself. Well, again, how many times do we say, and there's a word that really, really annoys me, is the word should. How many times do we tell ourselves, I should do that, or I must do that? Because to me, the words should and must are, I see them as negative outside influence. The teacher told me that, this is how I am, so therefore this is how I should behave. My parents expected something of me, so therefore I should go down that avenue. Whereas stuff that you enjoy doesn't tend to have the shoulds and the musts. It has the wants. I want to do this. I need to do this, because it's an internal drive. I think me moving from the 9-year-old systems analyst, totally analytical, computer-based person, through to where I am today has been a natural progression. And I've allowed that progression to happen. And in my life at this moment in time, again, is, like everybody, we're thinking and questioning and everything else. And I feel that I'm making another transition at the moment, in that I don't know where I'm going to end up. And I don't know, how I'm going to get from here to wherever that is, because I don't know, what the direction is at this moment in time, but I'm allowing it to happen. And I think we've forgotten, as we get older, we've forgotten that actually we are meant to change. We're meant.
Oh, that's powerful.
We are meant to change. If we didn't change, we'd still be wearing our diapers, from when we were a kid, our nappies. And every bit of information that we take in along that course of our life is changing us. And the challenge that we have is to be able to accept that, rather than fight against it, because we don't want to change. If we want everything to remain the same, then we are static. Therefore, we are falling. We're losing ground on who we are, rather than becoming who we can be.
And was it quite a scary, like, I know for me, I've been through, as you know, quite a lot of changes in the last few years. And I feel like when it was right, and you might have felt the same, when it was right, that change wasn't scary. It was like my body just required it. My brain just went, right, now you have to do this.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people that should and must. A lot of people in careers and in employment often feel like I should stay here, or I must stay doing this, or I must stay in this marriage, or I should be doing this. Is there, yeah, it's very strange on the mind when you kind of just have that need of, I need to make this change. It's something just by using words, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think, you know, I love the fact that you say you inherently knew that. I think a lot of us inherently know that that's what we, you know, we would do better doing. That would fulfill our soul and ourselves in a much better way. But I think a lot of us actually suppress that because of the pressures that are around. If we were to do that, it's much easier, putting it in a context of moving on from one relationship. It isn't far easier of saying, this relationship no longer suits me, I'm moving on. It's far easier to do that if you're a single person with your own income and you can just up and leave. The pressures that are on some women, some men, when they've got the mortgage, they haven't, you know, if they moved on, how do they keep a roof over their head? They may have children. I mean, it's, you know, without going into, you know, depth on the conversation, but, you know, a woman and an oppressive husband and no friends and family to help them to actually get out of that situation when their body is crying out for something different, and they know that it's crying out, but they can't take that because of the consequences of taking that action. So, you know, it would be very easy for me to say, well, you know, actually we should all be following our hopes and our dreams, and it really is easy, because if you find the right hope and dream, you can move on. You know, that's not a practicality.
That's a really honest response, and I really appreciate that. And I think it's, for a lot of people, it is a very difficult thing to have to shush that voice sometimes until they can make that change. But it was also really wonderful to hear that for you, you knew and you felt comfortable to make that change in your career, which is often the place that I feel it's a little bit easier to make a move, but still very terrifying, especially if you're changing across.
Yeah.
And do you feel like tech knowledge enabled you to move into Agile and speak with the tech teams as well as the higher ups, because it gave you that gusto and kind of experience?
Yeah, I think where I benefited specifically was the fact that because I had the technical knowledge, because I'd gone through the technical side of it, I understood about computers sometimes to a better level, because I'd worked for manufacturing. You know, I used to have to buy the bits and then create the computer. So I had the technical knowledge to be able to go and talk to the technical people in a way that gave me gravitas. But I also had the ability to have the basic, pure English type of communication, not the techie talk, to be able to go and talk with the stakeholders. So I had, but you know, both sides. But I'd like to bring that Agile back to the question of moving on from somewhere, because I think that Agile principle can be applied in any form of your life. Because sometimes I think what we're trying to achieve unto itself is so darn big that we can't comprehend it. It's too frightening. Let's say the person that's in a poor relationship with children, too frightening to contemplate, well, tomorrow I'm going to leave. But you can still adopt that Agile mentality, and going back to Sutherland about what the mentality is rather than what the process is. You can still adapt that agile mentality, even to something like that. So your big dream and goal might be to have, let's say, well, we'll use the same thing, left the husband with the children, and you've got a roof over your head. That might be your big dream goal, and you may not be able to see any way out of your situation to get to that big goal. So you might as well give up. You just bide your time, wait for the kids to leave, and then you've got the ability to move. But if you adopted an agile mindset on that, what you can start to do is this big, scary goal that you have no idea how to achieve is actually start thinking how you can take those steps to get there. Lao Tzu said the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So if you can think about, right, okay, part of the reason why I cannot move is because I don't have an income. Part of the reason why I don't have an income is because I don't have the skills. Part of the reason why I haven't got the skills is because I've never had the opportunity. And you can break these things down, and you can start with tiny little changes that you can make. A tiny little change of, I mean, it's difficult now, everybody's homeschooling, but maybe is there something that you would like to do for yourself, that you can sit down with your children homeschooling, look, mummy's doing the homework or daddy's doing the homework with you, so that you can capture and do that little bit of learning that might take you to the next step and the next step. If you haven't, that you haven't got money to be able to move. My grandmother and my mother, they both had, I can't remember how they used to call it, but runaway accounts, which was a bit of money stashed.
My nan has one of those.
Yeah, your own bit of money stashed. It's difficult today because we've gone pretty much cashless, but I know my nan, used to take just a little bit of money each week and stash it, so that if ever there was a crisis, she had runaway money. She was there for the whole duration, but it gave her a sense of security knowing that was there. So there's tiny little things that you can do to start the ball rolling that will eventually grow, and you will grow as a result of it, because every time you do something like that for yourself, your own confidence grows, your own strength grows, because you've got that buzz, the dopamine that goes around in your brain, because tick in the box, you've done it. Then you can then start growing those things until it gets closer and closer to that bigger idea, because that's how they do it. In the software environment, they say, right, okay, fine, we want a website that's going to do this and this, and we want to have these features, but they can't work on it all together. So they start right way from the very beginning. What do we have to have by way of a machine to put the website on? What do we have to create the website? What do we have to have the features? And then they build it all up. And so that agile mentality can be applied to any situation, any walk of life, and it will enable anybody to start taking those little single steps, or that first step of that 1,000-mile journey.
Wow. When you think of it in that way, massive things can be traced back to smaller and smaller and smaller stuff. So really, it makes it doable and not so terrifying. So it's kind of merged. I know we've gone back and forth between change as well as agile. They kind of mix together, I think. And that's why I found it so intriguing when I first had a really deep conversation with you about agile.
Yeah, I think as you may notice, because obviously we're doing this as a Zoom, and we'll be taking off the language, but whilst we've been talking, it has gone dark, and
It's gone very dark.
It's gone very dark. So it's in a software environment, sometimes the projects are so big that you haven't any idea as to where to start. In your personal life, there's things are so big that you wouldn't know where to start. My 9-year-old self would never have been able to understand where I got to when I was 25, what I'd managed to achieve by the time I was 35, where I've come to now in my life at age 60. So my 9-year-old self would never have been able to see that. But it's the fact that it didn't just happen overnight. I wasn't just suddenly, dropped into a work environment that I had to sort out, a huge mess. It's the fact that my experiences had been gained step by step by step, and dropping into a poor environment, that looks similar to what I managed to do there. That bit looks similar to what I managed to do here. And I would not, at age 25, I thought I'd made it. I thought that's as far as you go. My somewhere between 9 and 15, 16, I had decided that 25, if you hadn't got to where you wanted to be by the time you were 25, it was too late.
Wow, that's
so
fair.
Exactly. How stupid. And that stuck with me, because on my 25th birthday, I got up and I cried big time, because I hadn't got to where I wanted to be by the time I was 25, failing to think that I had, hopefully 75 more years after that to do it. And had I have at age 25 been put into the situations that I used to deal with on a regular basis at age 50, age 55, I would have completely frozen. But I grew in that agile way for me. I grew by taking the steps, by learning from those steps. And if I did something wrong, then I know I used to, but I'm not so bad now, didn't chastise myself from getting it wrong. I looked at myself and said, right, I can learn from that. And it meant that I was growing all the while, and what was around me was growing, and I was becoming a different person, which is why I moved from pure tech to really now pure people. The tech stuff is an aside. And I think that not chastising yourself is also very, very important. If we're meant to change, if we're meant to grow, then we have to learn. And if we have to learn, we have to fail because we don't get it right. It's like the little child that's learning to walk. When the child gets up on its feet, the first thing that the parents do is shoving their hands out, come to me, come to me, come to me, to encourage that child to take those steps. And if that child falls over, the first thing that the parent does is pick the child up and pop it back on its feet again to do it again. At no stage does the child turn around, do you know what, this walking life is pretty damn difficult, I'm not going to bother, all I ever do is fall over. And what do we do as adults? Oh God, I got that one wrong. I'm stupid. We have these little chattering monkeys that tell us that we've got it wrong, instead of, oh, we've just learned from that. I've just learned that I cannot walk under a 5-foot barrier and not smash my head because I'm 5'6". I've learned from that. Don't do it again. Yeah.
I think that's such a poignant part as well. Like, there's so many things I'm learning always whenever I have a conversation with you, but I do realize that the older I get, the less angry I'm getting at myself for making a failure, and it is more, oh, I've learned that, like, maybe make that register in your brain cells as a good thing. And something my mum said once is, no one died from that. Like, you're not a surgeon, you're not a neurosurgeon, and if you were, you'd have been learning for a lot longer to be that surgeon.
Oh yes.
And I think that was something that, for me, especially as a business owner, is something that has to be really worked on. Is you're going to make mistakes, and I don't think, unless you have to have a way to resolve it in an appropriate manner and then move on from it, because it can completely ruin your day. And I know we'd said we'd probably keep to around about half an hour, so I'd love from you, like, the 3 ways a business owner, an entrepreneur, or a leader can add some agile into their business? Would it put you on the spot, but would there be 3 ways that we could start adding agile to our daily lives?
Yes. I think the first thing is, whatever you're doing, don't look at it as a whole. Break it down to the composite parts and tackle those individual parts, because those individual parts will grow up into the whole that you're trying to achieve. Whether that's, creating a business from the onset, or if you're working with clients that give you, a big challenge, take it down to its composite parts. That's the first thing. The second thing that is going to be, and I'll reiterate what you've just said, is don't be hard on yourself. Accept that you will fail. If you're not pushing yourself hard enough, you won't fail. But if you are pushing yourself and you are trying to learn and you are trying to go, you will fail at some stage. But that's okay. That's perfectly okay. Accept it and then learn from it and then move on, because at some stage in the future you'll come back, the same lesson will approach you, and you'll go, hey, been there, done that one. No, I can't do it this way, so I'll do it this way instead. So
text boxes and mail merge.
Yeah, exactly. So they're the two. And the third is just to understand that, in my opinion, challenges that come your way are just ways of allowing you to grow. It's allowing you to step up and become the best that you can be. And again, taking it back to an agile environment, everybody in those small little teams, those little scrums, or whatever the team name is that you give to it, depending on what you're doing, that those small little teams, they're all there to be the best that they can be, but for the benefit of everybody around them. And so if you're working with your clients as a business, show up and be the best person that you can be for your client, so that your client benefits as well.
Thank you, Elaine. Always so just uplifting listening to you talk about just the wonders of just everything. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's all right. And I have recognised that this week we seem to have focused mainly on me and my knowledge, that maybe we need to start thinking about reversing the tables and seeing what we can pick from your brain about helping your clients and things like that, maybe.
Sharp intake of breath, have an agile mindset to think of that. That is a big chunk to think about.
Okay. So so I'll leave you to think about what your first steps will be.
Everything's fine. Thank you, Elaine.
You're welcome.